She said I was too safe and boring. Those 4 words ended everything. We were sitting in the living room of the apartment we'd shared for 3 years, the one I'd put the down payment on. The evening light was soft, catching the dust motes dancing in the air. I had just finished telling her my 5-year plan. It was a good plan. It involved paying off the car, increasing my contributions to our retirement accounts, and finally, saving enough for a down payment on a small house in a good school district. I thought it was a plan for our future, for our family. I looked at her, expecting a smile, maybe a kiss. Instead, her face was blank. Then she said it. "You're just so safe, Mark. It's boring." The words didn't land like a punch. They landed like ice water poured slowly down my spine. Safe? I thought safe was a good thing. Safe meant security. It meant I could provide for her, protect her. It meant thinking ahead so we wouldn't have to worry later. All my life, I'd been the responsible one, the planner, the guy who reads the fine print. I built my entire world on a foundation of safety, and she had just called my foundation boring. She went on, her voice gathering a strange kind of momentum, as if she was finally letting out a breath she'd been holding for years. "I want adventure, Mark. I want to live. I want someone who takes risks, who is spontaneous, not someone whose biggest thrill is finding a high-yield savings account." Every word was a confirmation. She didn't see my planning as love. She saw it as a cage. My careful, calculated steps towards a secure future weren't a path we were walking together. They were a prison she wanted to escape. I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I just felt something inside me snap. It was a quiet, clean break. The part of me that had spent years trying to build a perfect, secure life for her just went silent. In its place, a different feeling began to bloom. It was cold and sharp and clear. I nodded slowly. I stood up, walked to our bedroom, and packed a single bag. Clothes, my laptop, my toothbrush. She followed me, her expression shifting from frustration to confusion. "What are you doing?" she asked. "You want someone who takes risks," I said, my voice eerily calm. "So I'm taking one." I walked out of the apartment without looking back. I didn't get into my sensible, reliable sedan. I walked 3 blocks to an ATM, took out the maximum cash withdrawal, and took a cab to a cheap motel on the other side of town. The kind of place with flickering neon signs and questionable stains on the carpet. It felt like a different planet from our clean, minimalist apartment. The first thing I did in that dingy room was open my laptop. I logged into my brokerage account. There it was, the culmination of a decade of careful saving and disciplined investing. The stocks, the mutual funds, the nest egg that was the heart of my safe 5-year plan. My hand trembled as I hovered the mouse over the sell all button. It was the most reckless, the most irresponsible, the most unsafe thing I had ever considered doing. I thought of her face, the casual dismissal in her eyes. I thought of the word boring, and I clicked the button. The next morning, I went to the leasing office of our apartment building. I told them I was breaking the lease. I paid the penalty in full, with cash. I signed the paperwork that legally removed my name from the home we had built. In the space of 12 hours, I had liquidated my future and erased my present. I was untethered. For the first time in my adult life, I had no plan, and it was terrifying. But underneath the terror, that cold, sharp feeling was growing. It wasn't just clarity anymore. It was turning into something else. It was turning into rage. For the first week, I just existed in that motel room. The money from my stocks hit my bank account, a number so large it looked fake. I barely ate. I just sat in the dark, replaying her words over and over. Too safe, boring. Was she right? Had I wasted my life being cautious? The question burned in my mind. But then, a new question started to push its way through the fog of my pain. Why now? Why after 3 years did she suddenly need adventure? Things had been good. I thought they were perfect. My logical planning mind, the one she'd called boring, couldn't let it go. It needed to understand the data, and my ex-girlfriend Clara was now a data point I needed to analyze. So I did what any boring analytical person would do. I started observing. I still had her on my social media. I never unfollowed her. I just watched. For the first few days, there was nothing. Then, a week after I left, her first post appeared. It was a picture of a fancy cocktail, her hand holding it. But it was the other hand in the photo that caught my eye. A man's hand, wearing an expensive flashy watch. A watch I'd never seen before. The caption was simple, "Finally living." My heart, which I thought couldn't break any further, fractured again. It was that fast. She had replaced me in a week. Or, had she? My safe mind started connecting dots. Her late nights at work over the last few months. The hushed phone calls she'd end quickly when I walked into the room. The new expensive perfume she said she'd bought for herself. It wasn't a sudden change. It was a calculated campaign that I had been too trusting, too safe to see. The cold anger inside me solidified into something hard and heavy. This wasn't just a breakup. This was a betrayal of the highest order. She hadn't just left me. She and this new guy had been laughing at me behind my back, laughing at the boring, predictable man who was funding the very life she was complaining about. That's when I knew. I couldn't just move on. I couldn't just let this go. She wanted adventure. She wanted risk. Fine. I would give it to her. But it wouldn't be the kind she was expecting. My revenge wouldn't be loud or flashy. It would be quiet. It would be meticulous. It would be safe. So safe she'd never see it coming. I started my research. The guy's name was Julian. It didn't take long to find him. His social media was the complete opposite of mine. It was a monument to himself. Pictures of him on boats, in expensive clubs, next to sports cars that were clearly rented for the day. He presented himself as a high-flying entrepreneur, a day trader who made risky bets and won big. He was everything I wasn't. He was the adventure Clara wanted. I spent my days in that motel room, which I started to think of as my headquarters, turning it into a command center. I bought a new laptop, a burner phone. I used the public library's Wi-Fi. I became a ghost. I dug into Julian. My boring, methodical nature was now my greatest weapon. I didn't just look at his pictures. I analyzed them. I cross-referenced locations, checked timelines, looked for reflections in sunglasses and windows, and I found things. Julian wasn't a successful entrepreneur. He had a string of failed businesses and small debts. He wasn't a master day trader. He was a gambler. But more than that, he was a predator. I found old social media profiles, forum posts under different usernames. He had a pattern. He'd find women who were financially stable, usually women who were a little dissatisfied with their lives. He'd promise them the world, a life of excitement, and slowly, carefully, he'd drain their resources before moving on to the next one. Clara wasn't his partner in crime. She was his next victim. But my sympathy for her was gone. It had been incinerated by her betrayal. She had made her choice. She had chosen the flashy predator over the steady provider. She thought she was in on the adventure, but she was just the entry ticket. And worse, I realized with a sickening lurch, I was the original target. Their plan was never for her to leave me. Their plan was to get access to my savings, my boring investments. My leaving, cashing everything out and disappearing, had ruined their plan. Her insult hadn't been an emotional outburst. It had been a desperate last-ditch attempt to provoke me, to make me angry and reckless so they could take advantage. But my recklessness wasn't what they expected. I hadn't just gotten angry. I had vanished. I'd taken the entire chessboard off the table. Now I was going to set up a new board, one where I made all the rules. My plan began to form. It was intricate, layered, and relied on the very traits they both despised in me: patience, observation, and meticulous planning. I wasn't going to expose Julian to Clara. That was too simple. That would make her a victim, and she might even run back to me, looking for safety. No, I was going to make them destroy each other. I was going to use their own greed as the weapon. I needed to create a lure, something so irresistible that a man like Julian couldn't ignore it. I used a portion of my liquidated funds to set up a new identity. I created a persona named Mr. Alistair Finch. Alistair was everything Julian pretended to be, but for real. He was an old money reclusive investor. His online footprint was almost non-existent, which only added to the mystique. He didn't flash his wealth. He was discreet, powerful, and most importantly, he valued security and long-term, safe investments above all else. He was in essence a hyper-exaggerated version of my old self. He was the ultimate boring success story. The next step was to get Alistair on Julian's radar. I knew from my research that Julian frequented certain online forums for high-risk, high-reward stock tips. He was always looking for the next big thing. So Mr. Finch made a quiet entrance. He didn't post tips. He posted analyses. Deep, complex, almost boringly detailed breakdowns of market trends. and buried within these long dry posts were subtle predictions. A small pharmaceutical company whose stock would jump. A tech startup that was overvalued. Week after week, Alistair's quiet predictions came true. People in the forum started noticing. This Finch guy wasn't a flashy guru. He was something else. He was a ghost who seemed to see the future. Julian, as I knew he would, took the bait. He sent a private message to Mr. Finch, cocky but also trying to sound impressive. I, as Alistair Finch, waited 3 full days before replying. My reply was short, professional and dismissive. I told him I wasn't an advisor, and that I didn't associate with speculative gamblers. This, of course, was like waving a red flag in front of a bull. Julian became obsessed. He messaged me again and again, trying to prove he was a serious player. He bragged about his non-existent successes. I let him work for it. For weeks I maintained the persona of the reluctant, ultra-cautious mentor. I slowly, carefully, began to feed him information. Not tips but a philosophy. The philosophy of safe wealth. I talked about offshore trusts, private equity, things that were so far out of his league it was laughable. But to Julian, it sounded like the secret handshake to the world of the truly rich. Meanwhile, I was working on Clara. This part was more delicate. I needed to plant a seed of doubt. I knew her passwords. We'd used the same ones for everything. A combination of her pet's name and her birthday. Predictable, safe. I logged into an old forgotten cloud sharing account we had once used for vacation photos, and I just watched. I could see their life unfolding. The receipts from expensive dinners, the booking confirmations for weekend trips, all funded by the money she was likely draining from the savings account she thought I didn't know about. The account I had set up for her as an emergency fund. The irony was so thick I could taste it. I started my psychological campaign. I used a spoofing service to send an anonymous text to her phone. It was just a single word, careful, that's it. Nothing more. It was deniable, untraceable. But for someone living a lie, a single word like that can be a cancer. A week later, I sent a small bouquet of cheap flowers to our old apartment. The kind you get at a gas station. The card was blank. Julian would assume it was from an admirer of Clara's. But I knew Clara. She'd wonder if it was from another woman in his life. I was creating tiny cracks in their fantasy world. The main event was approaching. I, as Alistair Finch, finally told Julian about a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. A private offshore investment fund. It was completely fictional, of course. I built a fake, professional-looking website for it. The buy-in was substantial. $250,000. It was an amount I calculated they could just barely scrape together if they liquidated everything Clara had, and whatever Julian had managed to grift. I told Julian the window was small. The fund was closing to new investors in 2 weeks. The pressure was on. I could feel his excitement through his messages. This was it. The big score that would make him a made man. He could finally stop pretending. I could almost hear him selling the dream to Clara. How this one safe investment vouched for by the brilliant Mr. Finch would set them up for life. He was using my own philosophy against her. It was perfect. As they scrambled to gather the money, I escalated my campaign against Clara's peace of mind. I created a fake social media profile. A beautiful woman. I had her like a few of Julian's old photos. Just enough for Clara to notice if she was looking. And I knew she would be looking. That careful text would have made her paranoid. The day of the wire transfer arrived. Julian was a nervous wreck. He messaged Mr. Finch confirming the account details. I gave him the information for an anonymous, untraceable crypto wallet. I told him once the transfer was made, it was irreversible. The point of no return. He wrote back, getting it done now. This is the first day of the rest of our lives. But while Julian was on his way to the bank, my final package was being delivered to the apartment. I had sent it via courier to ensure it arrived at the precise moment he was gone. Inside the package was a folder, and inside the folder was a masterpiece of deception, built from truths. I had printed out my research on Julian's past scams, the forum posts where he'd bragged about conning other women. I included fabricated flight itineraries for a one-way ticket to the Cayman Islands in his name only, and the master-stroke screenshots of fake flirtatious messages between Julian and the fake social media profile I had created. The messages were dated over the past few weeks, and they talked about their plan and getting the money from the boring girl so they could finally be together. It was a perfect narrative. The con man was about to pull his ultimate con, and Clara was the final mark. I can only imagine the scene. Clara, alone in the apartment, her excitement about their new life building. The courier arrives. She opens the package. She sees the proof. The blood drains from her face as she realizes the adventure she signed up for was a lie designed to ruin her. The man she betrayed me for was about to do the same to her, but on a much grander scale. But my plan didn't rely on her confronting him. That would be too messy. It relied on her own greed and desperation. She wouldn't just be hurt. She would be furious. She would feel like a fool, and she would want one thing: to get the money before he could. I knew their banking situation because I had set it up. They had pooled all their cash into a single joint account for the big transfer. She had access. Julian returned to the apartment later that afternoon, beaming, triumphant, ready to celebrate their new wealthy future. But the account was empty. Clara was gone, and the folder I had sent was sitting open on the coffee table. He would have seen it. He would have realized what she thought he had done, and he would have realized she had just done it to him for real. She had taken all their money, her money, his money, all of it, and run. The two predators, the thrill seeker and the con man, had turned on each other. Their world of excitement and risk had imploded. I didn't need to see it to know it was ugly. He would have hunted for her. She would be hiding, terrified. Their adventure had become a desperate, paranoid chase. There would be screaming phone calls, threats. Eventually the authorities would likely get involved over something else entirely. A domestic dispute, check fraud, one of Julian's many other small crimes coming to light as his life unraveled. Their partnership, built on lies, ended in a spectacular bonfire of their own making. And where was I? I was in a small, quiet town 1,000 miles away. I had used a portion of my money to buy a small house. For cash, it had a little workshop in the back. I was starting a business, a quiet one, restoring old furniture. It was methodical, detailed work. It required patience. It was by all accounts a very safe life. I never became Mr. Finch again. The website vanished. The email address was deleted. The crypto wallet, which never received $1, was abandoned. Alistair Finch was a ghost who had served his purpose. I never checked up on them again. I didn't need to. I had written the ending to their story, and I was confident in my work. My revenge wasn't about watching them suffer. It was about proving a point, mostly to myself. My nature hadn't been my weakness. It was my strength. Being safe didn't mean being weak. Being a planner didn't mean being boring. It meant having the ability to see the whole board. It meant that when someone tried to knock over my carefully placed pieces, I could build a trap so perfect, so elegant, that they would walk into it willingly, smiling the whole way. She wanted me to take a risk, so I did. I risked everything I had built, and in doing so I built something new, something that was all mine, something strong and quiet and truly, unshakably safe. And I've learned that there's a certain kind of adventure in that too. The quiet thrill of knowing you're the one who sees it all, the one who plans the game, while everyone else is just playing their part. They thought I was boring. They never realized that the most dangerous people are the ones you never see coming. Thank you for listening to this story. If you were hooked until the very end, please show your support by hitting that like button. Let me know in the comments what you thought about this journey from a safe man to a silent mastermind. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell so you don't miss our next story. And if you know someone who would love a good revenge thriller, please share this video with them. Until next time.